Hey everyone, and welcome to Big Red Homestead. I'm Josh, that's Caleb, and today we are going through the best and worst case scenarios for Dylan Raiola and why, Heisman, potential in the future, career outcomes, but especially for this season, we broke down all the stats from all previous 5-star quarterbacks since 2013. So there's basically 30 of them. We're breaking down all the stats in this video, going through what the average Big Ten quarterback looks like and real statistical expectations for Dylan Raiola in this season for Nebraska and what that could mean for Nebraska versus the atrocity that was the quarterbacks last year and how much better that could look. So it's going to be a fun one. Caleb, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. 14 days till I'm with 90,000 of my closest friends in Memorial Stadium. I cannot wait to watch us beat up UTEP, and it's so exciting. We really get to see Dylan Raiola in full action, all the chasing three.
We don't even know if he's starting yet, all right?
Exactly.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yes, Heinrich Harburg, he's got a real chance. Actually, if you just saw it too, there was a video of Dylan throwing to Heinrich Harburg, so I think, as we all expected, that was probably the more likely outcome of this season. It's really exciting, especially if you take a look last year at our quarterback situation. Everybody knows it was dark. We led the whole nation in turnovers last year. 31 of those bad boys. I mean, man, you look at Nebraska QBs just added up last year. I mean, our completion percent, 52%. Oof. 1,631 yards, not terrible. 10 touchdowns, but 16 picks. My goodness, that is just so rough.
It's
so
brutal.
rough.
I mean, and that's the thing. The goal for this video is to compare what last year was like and then see how much better Dylan makes us just by being decent. And the good news is, spoiler alert, the odds for him to be decent are very high. And so we're going to be getting into the details there. So that's really what we're going to start out with. And like you said, you set the table already for us here. Set up the table first and say what went wrong last season for the quarterbacks and why just at a baseline, we should expect a little bit of an reversion to the mean, to the average.
I mean, we're in a tough spot, right? We get Jeff Sims. We get a guy who we think is flashy, exciting, has a big arm. Again, we even see it in the spring game, and it's like, okay, he looks like he could throw a little bit. And then when we get to, in Minnesota, we see that that is not the case. In the
something
turnovers
broke in Minnesota. I mean, it was
the turnovers
brutal.
started and did not stop. Fumbles, not being able to catch a snap. There isn't enough words, adjectives, superlatives to explain what happened to Jeff Sims. And even the rest of our quarterbacks. I mean, Heinrich stepped in and did a solid enough job. But at the end of the day, threw way too many picks. I mean, 16 with all of our quarterbacks. Chubba Purdy couldn't hold on to the football either. It was spooky. I mean, our quarterbacks had an 8.8% turnover-worthy plays. Again, that's
unreal. And to put that into context, the average Big Ten player, so of last season, for example, Hudson Card, Luke Altmaier, and Ben Bryant, 3 very average, below average Big Ten quarterbacks, their average turnover-worthy play rate was 3.2%. So not only were we worse, not only were we 2 times worse, we were pushing 3 times worse turnover-worthy play rate than below average Big Ten quarterbacks.
It is crazy. I mean, attempts per interception last year, Nebraska, for every 16.3 attempts, we averaged a pick. A normal QB throws 25 to 30 times a game, so you're pushing 2, which makes sense because we turn the ball over so frequently. But again, these numbers are, it's such an outlier, such a statistical anomaly. It's hard to wrap your head around, as we've seen everybody in the whole country just be so, it's mind-blowing how bad the numbers are when you see it and think about it. And so you think if we just regress to the mean, right? A Hudson Card, nothing exciting, nothing too flashy, a solid quarterback, a Luke Altmaier, then we're lowering the turnovers 2 to 3 times?
Yeah, I mean, again, their average was 38.3. So we averaged every 16 attempts last year, one was picked. They averaged every 38 attempts, one was picked. That alone can change the game. And so
we win a lot more.
To even hop ahead, the impact that this could potentially have is, spoiler alert here, but if we look at what the average 5-star quarterback does. So what I did is we went through and we pulled out all 5-star quarterback seasons since 2013. So we have a sample size
bad in there,
roughly of about 31 quarterbacks. And if you just average out the quarterbacks who put over 140 snaps their freshman year, which there was about 20, they had a turnover-worthy player rate of 3.5%. So right in line, just slightly above the average Big Ten quarterback from last year, Ben Bryant and those guys. So like, that's how big of an outlier last year was for Nebraska. It was legitimately so unbelievably impossible. And that's why it was so surprising, because like in 2021 at South Carolina with Satterfield, he had 3 different quarterbacks playing that year. It was Luke Doty, Jason Brown, and Zeb Nolan. So they had 3 different dudes, just random dudes
just like
playing
us.
quarterback, just like us. Except that season, they had 20 touchdowns and only 10 picks. And they had a completion percentage of 57% and a decent amount of yards per attempt and only a turnover-worthy play rate of 3.6%. So like, you can't even argue that it's a Satterfield thing necessarily. The question is, if you just replace that with Dylan Raiola, who could be even just average, how many more wins does that give Nebraska last season? I think that's what's worth talking about.
3?
I mean,
4?
I mean, that's the thing. And
definitely the Iowa game. Definitely the Minnesota game. I mean,
Maryland, Wisconsin.
I mean, we killed ourselves. That's 4
Colorado?
games right there. We keep talking about 3 points, but what about the 3 turnovers that we just continue to average each and every game?
Right.
So that's really the difference. I mean, forget chasing
and let alone the improvement
Chasing,
in yards per attempt or completion percentages that could convert into additional yardage or convert for first down conversions. There's so many things there. And obviously last year, I mean, not only, sure, Jeff Sims himself was an outlier, but then
incredible outlier.
When Harburg and Purdy come in, you still see
way too many
turnovers. The offense as a whole was still tragic. And so we had the injuries all over the place. Like half the receiving core went down. 3 offensive linemen were hurt at one point. 3 running backs were hurt or off the roster or not playing. And we had the turnover problems even for the running backs. You couldn't even trust them. So like, quarterbacks were trying to do a lot and working and really trying to force things and created a lot of problems. So like, there's a lot of opportunity for the offense as a whole to revert back to the mean. Having an infinitely better receiving core alone could be enough to turn things around for, like, you know, to turn Harburg into an even average quarterback this year.
And that's fair. Like, we couldn't even, maybe if you don't put all the turnovers on the quarterback, but maybe the freshman wide receivers were in the wrong spot, and that's a turnover. And I think that's fair for some of them too. Now you upgrade those positions, not even thinking about the quarterback. And this offense goes way up to the IQ, the playing time, the reps. And yeah, I mean, our wide receiver core is one of the strengths of the team now. Instead of, again, we just lost everybody. It really was overall a perfect storm in a lot of ways. Yeah.
When we get into actual like seasons comparisons for Dylan Raiola, there's a very small sample size. I think it's really important to emphasize how unique of a situation this is for a 5-star to be walking into this type of situation. I mean, first of all, Nebraska is an outlier school versus the sample size of all the quarterbacks that we are looking at. I mean, you know the traditional names of these schools that they're walking into: the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the USCs of the world, even UCLA or Clemson or some of those guys. The majority of these quarterbacks don't really compare that well with what Dylan's walking into and what he's expected to do in his first year. I mean, Dylan is expected to play 600, 700 snaps this year. And if you go to a bowl game, 800, something like that. So we have very few freshman quarterbacks who have ever had to do that. Basically, those guys are Dante Moore, Caleb Williams, JT Daniels, Trevor Lawrence, Christian Hackenberg, Jacob Eason, and Josh Rosen. So some big time names in there. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams, even like Josh Rosen, of course, who had a really, really good freshman season. And so it's an interesting bag, hit or miss bag there. Dylan's supposed to be pushing 700 snaps. We're only 5 guys have done that. Not even Caleb Williams did that. JT Daniels, Trevor Lawrence, Hackenberg, Eason, and Rosen. So those were basically the only 5 even semi-comparable situations. But again, all of those guys were going into much more established schools who are generally pulling in another 5-star or other 5-stars in a class with those guys, like Georgia or Clemson or USC or Oklahoma. With that table set like that, with those comparable situations, what are your expectations for Raiola? And like, what do the stats say? And what does your opinion say about how good Raiola can be this year?
I like it a lot. I think as a player, you know, as an athlete, I want to play. And so I think that was really part of the reason why Dylan chose Nebraska, right? He wants the reps. And that's another thing is we see 5-stars who continue to play and continue to get snaps at the same school end up progressing a lot and getting a lot better into those first-round draft picks. He's betting on himself to come here to be able to get the reps now. I also don't think the situation is bad, right? While those names are pretty prestigious, and again, you get, obviously, we're a prestigious legacy name, but recent history hasn't been amazing for us. But I still think a quarterback of any of the calibers in the last, maybe bar the Scott Frost era, could have done well and been successful. So I think he can succeed just as equally in this situation. I think Trevor Lawrence is really the outlier just because Clemson's defense was so special. So like the table was really set for him, right? The table was really set for him to be amazing. But I think this is good. I think Dylan's betting on himself. You look at the average quarterback, right, for a 5-star QB, a special group, right? Not very many of them fit in this category. But if you just say that is Dylan Raiola, we just take it out of the best and the worst, the highs and the lows, which kind of average out to what it is. You're like, man, the attempts per interception, I think that's what blows my mind. The average 5-star QB, 56.3 attempts per interception.
Yeah.
That's what gets you excited.
Last year, we had 16 attempts per every interception. So like 3 to 4 times better.
And that's just average, right? That's
not a true freshman quarterback where the sample size is guys who played 140 snaps. So like these guys are literally walking off the bench and playing 4 times, turning the ball over 4 times less than our quarterback. That's actually another side note. The only Big Ten quarterback we've ever seen is Christian Hackenberg do this. Penn State fans would more look at his freshman year actually being a pretty successful year. The flop was the rest of his career that didn't really live up to the hype.
And honestly, that 2013, like Penn State hadn't really been the same, right? Like, just in everything that had happened.
Right. That was, they were coming off of a lot of chaos there.
A lot of chaos to get a 5-star QB, to get someone in there. I think like Hackenberg, again, that freshman year. Yeah,
Hackenberg was from Pennsylvania.
What he did. Yeah, so exactly. That's very similar, actually, because Penn State's probably about the same caliber at Nebraska at that point. And also...
And you want to know what his stat line was that year? It was 59% completion percentage, 20 touchdowns, 10 picks. He did take 21 sacks that year. They ended up going 8-5 that year after the bowl game. So it was a decent year for them. And overall, for Nebraska's perspective, that'd be a pretty decent season, obviously.
Yeah, we would definitely take that. I think that's a very, 20 touchdowns, 10 picks. That seems about right. I think even less could be possible. I do think that not great O-lines is comparable. But I also think Hackenberg wasn't quite the mover of the pocket. Yes. I also think that Dylan's kind of a one of one, right? Like I'm betting on him being fantastic. Just the arm strength, the ease that he throws the football, the angle changes that he can do. Again, you keep seeing the tape and you really think that he's that guy. But I'd take a Christian Hackenberg type freshman year. And I really did think that, maybe he did do a lot for Penn State. That helped the program in a lot of ways. For sure. Yeah.
Who knows? Like it sets the stage also for them to get Drew Aller. Aller came in. He didn't play a lot his freshman year, though. But then, of course, second year looked incredible. And that's a trend. And that's not something I wanted to highlight in the future here. But I think the baseline expectation for me is that Raiola's going to come in and be an above average Big Ten quarterback. And that is statistically backed by the average performance of these true freshmen that come in and play. When they come in and play, it's actually a signal that they are pretty mature players normally, unless it's a desperate situation. That's the weird scenario with Raiola, is that he came in with the expectation to start, where not many of these guys did. It actually was because of an injury or another situation that caused them to come in and play. Even Caleb Williams didn't come in with the initial expectation to play his freshman year. So this is why it's so such an unprecedented scenario.
Rattler.
Yeah, exactly. And then Rattler came in. Rattler had underperformed, and then Caleb Williams came in and dominated. What's the best case scenario in your mind and the worst case scenario? And play me the narratives for both. Like, why could it be the best case scenario and why could it be the worst case scenario?
I think worst case scenario, we'll go with the bad first, is that, okay, so we lost Teddy Prohaska. That's a pretty big loss this year for Nebraska. Not that he played it great or anything, but just our O-line has been the struggle. I do think that Mazkua is interesting. Hopefully Ben Scott, another year at Nebraska, can do a lot for us. Just when you said like Hackenberg, he got sacked a lot. That'd be the worry for Dylan, that, again, he gets injured because of our bad O-line, or that the pressure of, I think teams are going to send a lot at us. There's going to be a lot of blitzes. The best way to beat a great quarterback is, again, to not let him throw, not give him time. So I think that would be the worst case scenario for Dylan, where if not injury, but then just being pressured so much that he continues to see ghosts and he gets bad reps early, builds some of that maybe scar tissue. But I think he's above that. I really do. But I think that would be the worst case scenario. And then the best case scenario, it's Trevor Lawrence. More so, a Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams, where his
Dylan,
arm talent is just that good.
Yeah, I think Dylan presents something unique where he can really be a one of two, and the second one is Patrick Mahomes. Again, that is his. It's crazy.
The question for me is the athleticism.
But
I think at this point, it's like, how good can you be? How avoidant can you be? And we've seen the guys who work really well in college. I mean, Caleb Williams, his like just evasiveness in the pocket is unreal. The same thing with Shedeur Sanders. It's just like his ability to be slippery and just take one step, two step, and get out. It's just like
even the Dylan Gabriels, like again, that poise. If early we see that Dylan is poised under pressure, can get those throws out anyway, and like you said, is elusive and just shows, I mean, a great ability to work up the pocket, work out of the pocket, and his footwork just looks on point from day one. I mean, watch out. Watch out, because the arm talent we've definitely seen from day one. It's if we can see that pocket presence, I mean, we are looking at one of those guys where, yes, this is a one overall guy, and the stats are a lot better than the average. I know a likely scenario is it's somewhere in the middle, and then we start building as we go. But I think our schedule bodes well for that. Again, we have a lot of our easier opponents for Dylan to take some learning opportunities. Maybe we drop one because, as we've seen from all these QBs and we saw from all of their stats, they all had a couple stinkers at some point in time. Even Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams, they didn't have some great ones. The other thing is they had some absolute games where they took over.
And that's usually pretty early on. One of their first like 4 or 5, you have a game where you're like, oh my word. And that's the signal.
And it's against it can be against a great opponent too, where again, their talent is just so above everything else, so high class that it doesn't matter who you play because the talent's there. And I think that's going to happen for Dylan. I really do. But I guess that's the worry. If we get like 8 games in and I haven't seen the oh my goodness, welcome to college football, Dylan Raiola is the truth.
Sure.
Then maybe I start to get a little nervous statistically, just from what we've seen in the range of outcomes. But
yeah, again, JT Daniels would be one of the worst case scenarios. I mean, as a career, and first year it was at least okay. I mean, from PFF's rankings, I think he had a 59, and on the season he had a 59% completion percentage, 14 touchdowns, 10 picks. So like that was decent, but his career kind of fell apart. I think his mental game kind of fell apart a little bit, and he really lost it going forward. His confidence was busted. So, he became kind of the average. He went to Rice and transferred, which is this whole thing. So he's kind of the worst case scenario, I think. Even in the first year, when you look at the rankings, I mean, he had a 58 rating his freshman year. That was the worst out of those guys. Dante Moore would be the only other one that was worse, but he didn't play as many games. So out of the 5 or 6 most comparable, the outcomes are pretty good, and all of them are better than what we had last season. That's really what's crazy here.
Which is so nice. Yeah, I think the other thing for Dylan is the excitement of knowing that if he sticks around, like the improvement will just continue. That's what's so impressive about 5 stars is they take huge jumps each year. So even if Dylan's just like a 76 QB this year, the amount to know that he can just jump up so much next year, they'll learn so much, they get so much better. Again, just because so much of this game is mental, obviously, for the quarterback. Again, we've seen it I think Drew Aller is a great example. He came in, and then the jumps that we've seen him take.
Yeah, he looked okay in his first game that he played his freshman year, but nothing crazy.
But man,
I know we both doubted him actually a little bit going into second year. Like, is this really going to happen? And then he just looked great. And so this is the chart that I have here on the screen now is careers for 5 stars. On average, their PFF grade goes from 68.8 to 74.0 to 82.2. 82.2 is a legitimately great top 25 type quarterback. So like by year 3. So that's the average outcome for all these guys over time. So they do develop, the talent's there, and the rankings and the recruiting stuff does matter. Like, these guys are good, and a lot of the scouts agree. And so that is actually something to take into account 100%. So the base improvement should be significant.
It's an instant level up. It's an instant level up if it's just the most occurring thing that happens. And then again, we have the excitement of this is an outlier because we're at Nebraska, and that could mean something special from Dylan Raiola. And
sure.
As a Husker fan, and just from what I've seen, I'm really expecting it. And I think that one of these first few games, he'll establish himself.
I was just going to highlight that because I made the average 5-star season, the average of Nebraska's quarterbacks in 2023, Spencer Rattler season with Satterfield's quarterbacks in 2021, and then the average of the Big Ten QBs, which is Hudson Card, Luke Altmaier, and Ben Bryant. And when you average all those together, that's nerfing, and including Nebraska's horrible season last year, you still get a situation where, Raiola would throw for 15 touchdowns, 10 picks, 6.9 yards per attempt, over 2,000 yards this year, and with a turnover-worthy play rate of 4.7 and a big time rate of 4.5. So he's still throwing the ball downfield and really going after it. So that would still be a massive improvement versus what Nebraska had last year. And I really do think if you just insert that stat line in Nebraska last season, Nebraska's a 9-win team. And so this year, that's where the excitement comes, is like, that's the medium, below medium outcome for Dylan Raiola. What if he's just legit? And then suddenly you're talking about the potential for a dominant 9 wins, or again, a locked in 9 wins, or even the potential for 10.
Yeah. And then that potential for 10 and maybe knocking on the door of something exciting
of
like
college
the
playoffs. Yeah.
And
so there is an upside scenario there. And that's what we'll talk about in a future video as well. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it. This actually was longer than I thought, but we're going to be ranking all quarterbacks in the Big Ten in the next video. So be on the lookout for that. And so definitely turn on notifications for the channel, because it's going to be coming. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. But as always, I'm Josh. That's Caleb. This has been Big Red Homestead. And guys, we'll see you next time.
Go Big Red,
baby.